Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast which asks which movies are well worth watching and remembering for all time. Every episode we discuss a different piece of film history to decide if it should make its way into our movie vault. Filled with questions, trivia and crazy challenges, it's the perfect way to deep dive into a myriad of movies. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a glimpse of what to expect in today's episode. So it was interesting in my mind to kind of like compare and contrast the two because there are so many similarities between them.
Why do I feel like we're going to argue about this film again, David?
As I watched it, I was like, this is going to happen.
Oh, there's a death glare happening here.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained? I'll be back. Here's Johnny. Oh, hi, Mark.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
I'm Batman. It's not the car. It's a silly movie boat. I'll get you, my pretty.
To infinity and beyond. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Well, good movies.
Hello and welcome to today's episode with me, your host, David Osgood, joined by my co-host, Craig McDonald, serving his sentence by taking part in this game show of movie madness, Well Good Movies, the podcast that asks which movies are well worth watching and deserve to be remembered for all time. Hello, Craig.
We both know I'm the game master in this situation. Let's not kid ourselves.
But are you like controlling the game within your own punishment? I don't understand.
How is this a punishment?
Look, we're going with the storyline for the year that you've committed some form of crime, and this film has people who've done crimes in a game show. Just run with it, okay?
Yeah, but that's also on the basis of a corrupt state, like making up crimes for various people. So what you're saying at this point, David, is you're the prick behind everything.
I think that was pretty evident from the beginning, in which I just accused you of committing a crime with no basis for it. So, yeah.
No, but it's just become clear to me at which point earlier when I ended the call on you, I think I was justified and I might just do it again at some point. Rebel against the system.
I was about to say the rebellion has begun. Craig has had a rebellious streak tonight. There's been game show challenges and all sorts. Well, we'll see what randomness occurs in today's discussion. I know there was lots of tangents and stuff we've been going through in our last few episodes. But over now to our contestant joining us this week. It is podcaster and filmmaker, our previous guest, Johann Chipol. Hello, Johann.
Hello.
I did not sign up for this game show. Where's the insurance? What's happening here? But hi there.
Are you looking for your court-appointed theatrical agents?
Yeah, and also an exit. I don't know if I can find the exit, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm here now. Then, so hi everyone. I'm doing good. Thank you very much on that end. I'm actually quite excited for this one we're talking about today. So, yeah, I have thoughts. So,
oh, good. Well, Johann, you made like quite the impression recently in terms of your last few appearances. Obviously, you are one of the reigning champions of our Endgame special as part of the Cocaine Cubs.
yes, and can I just say one thing? I finally got to see Cocaine Bear.
Yes,
by
I was
the way.
going to say, is this led to the parent animal?
Yeah, I
now
feel
being...
I was so happy when I saw this movie for the simple fact that there was plenty of Cocaine Bear. That's all I was asking. There was enough cocaine and there was enough bear for me. It wasn't like Snakes on a Plane where it was only like 10% snakes and a plane. This is plenty of Cocaine Bear and I was dead happy with it. So I think that's the end of my year now. I don't have to watch any more movies now. We've reached peak for the rest of the year, I think. So
I mean, I'm just excited to see it based on all the memes I keep seeing. My favorite that I had to send to David was somebody photoshopped Scarface to look like Fozzie Bear.
amazing.
I also like the one which is like just the Marvel sort of spoof of like Cocaine Bear will return. And I'm just like, I kind of want this to happen.
Cocaine Bear 2, there is more cocaine. That's quite literally just all you sold it to me.
He does an Iron Man 2. He just jumps out of a plane to AC/DC.
Yeah, just all the cocaine. Amazing.
So, Johann, as well as your win on the Endgame special and, the win as the Cocaine Cubs with Katie, last time you were on, we were discussing 28 Days Later, and we came across this concept with Danny Boyle of It's a Choice. And I'm happy to report that this seems to have at least stuck with me, at least, in which I've been editing episodes and realized that I've started using this as a phrase. For example, as you'll now hear, in the last episode, I think the charisma of Snipes really, again, embraces, because it's from the get-go. Like, as soon as you see that character, you're like, oh, wow, this is a choice.
It's a choice! I'm so glad that I've now somehow just got into your lexicon, basically. Yes. Here is a new phrase you can use.
Is this now going to be the official start of, like, the David It's a Choice counter?
It's a choice. Ding! Yes, we need a ding every time that happens in the edit.
There's going to be many run-in themes like that, I think, for the year. There's the whole, like, genre confusion of certain films. There's the actual, like, it's a movie argument of, like, Rush Hour. There's quite a few tangents which have started recently.
What's been good at the moment is like Ed and I have been doing a lot more enigmatic video stuff. You've probably seen that on the YouTube's things. Unfortunately, Ed was going to join us, but he couldn't come in today. Admittedly, there's a good reason. He is seeing Scream 5 and Scream 6 in a double bill, and he already had it booked. And I said, that's fine. Go and enjoy Scream in New York. I get it. Which now I'm disappointed there's no musical number. But we've been doing a lot of video stuff, and I've been venturing slightly away from podcasting slightly, and I have been doing screenings, and I've been doing some live events stuff happening. At the time of recording, on Saturday, we're going to be doing a big screening of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is an amazing little bit. We're going to be as part of the Cult Film Club, where we literally just show good cult films. At least we have tried to do that. We haven't gone to the bad territory yet because I actually want an audience. Although the first one we did was Pink Flamingos, so that was a choice. But we had our stride. We did Buckaroo Banzai. We're doing Scott Pilgrim, and at the time of recording, so it would already been gone by now. But then the next one, a bit of a clue on that, and we're doing Clue, which you've already discussed at some point. So Clue. Everyone loves Clue, but we're going to be doing Clue, and it's been kind of nice doing these kind of screenings and working as well with the Nottingham Bad Movie Club as well. Doing a lot of those kind of screens. So I've kind of ventured away slightly and now become kind of an events organizer. I don't know how that happened, but I'm now gone in that direction. It's been quite fun. And liking to see, like, introducing people to new movies, but having that sort of that fun interactivity of things. And like, we have goodie bags, we give prizes away, we encourage costume, we do all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to also get, like, celebrities that could do like video chats in the beginning of it, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what my thing's been going on, and really just developing that and see where it goes.
Yeah, it sounds really fun, especially, like you said, by seeing some of the selections, because obviously with this podcast, we only get to talk about certain films, or, there's only one film that we can discuss per episode, etc. So then you see other, the ones that are happening at this screening, etc. And you're like, oh, that would be a great one that I want to revisit. Something like Scott Pilgrim has been one which I've meant to revisit for years, because especially so many actors have now become more famous since that film. So yeah, and it's just always a fun chance to just kind of bring up a random movie, isn't it? Rather than do the kind of typical, we're talking about this because there's a sequel, or like you said, Scream or something like that. Like, I'm sure people are having a great time at the Scream screenings, but I'm sure that there is a lot of those kind of like, like marathon screenings. Whereas if it's something that just people are less likely to have seen, and you can kind of grab them with that and be like, hey, why not watch this? Then it's just a great way to kind of get some undiscovered gems for some people, I think. So we've already alluded to game shows at the beginning, so we'll now have our question this week, which I'll throw to you first, Johann, which is, if you were in a futuristic, life-threatening game show, like what is in today's film, what actual game show would you like it to be based on?
Jesus. Now, this is the thing, like, which would it just be a game show I just want to be on, or would it be a game show that I think the future would have?
Just you want to be on.
Okay, well, it was up to me then. I mean, I'm just imagining, like, I want a future version of Pointless.
This is why I chose, like, if it's something that would, like, legitimately happen in the future, it probably would be quite boring, whereas future Pointless is a lot more entertaining.
But I want a legitimate version of Pointless. And do you know when the pair leave? Right, I don't want them to. I want a trap door that just drops them into an abyss, and because you have to go all the way down, woo, get to the bottom. I wouldn't mind Pointless. Although, if it was a real future, and if it's like this movie, I get a feeling it's going to be more like Takeshi's Castle, which I wouldn't mind going on. But I know instead of like just being full of rubber and like rubber bits, I mean, to be frank, those guys must have got some injuries from half the stuff they were doing on that show. So yeah, it's either a weird future version of Pointless, or I just go full hog and go Takeshi's Castle and see how far I go before I like break a bone or all my bones.
Yeah, I was thinking of like how more psychotic can you make Pointless, and then I was just thinking of the bar that they have, the blue blue doo, 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 doo. And I was like, if they ask 100 people, maybe that is 100 people, like just literally the people who didn't say that or whatever being shoved off like a tower or something.
Yeah, and by the end of it, you see they're either thrown off this tower, or you just see them just like put into a cage. Like these 50 people, these 50 people didn't get this. Whoop.
Yeah, like how it turns like green when it is Pointless, like just seeing like a skyscraper full of people, and then just like once like that one person has been ejected, the entire skyscraper lights up green, like woo, and everyone's like, yay!
Finally, no one has to go.
I was gonna say that I just imagined the skyscraper just going down.
Yeah,
You just actually blow it up.
Waving.
Yeah, you do have to think again. We're going too deep into the logic here, but like, how do you then demolish? Like, oh, only one floor must survive. Like, that's quite an interesting technical challenge.
Just lots of just very controlled explosions.
Yeah,
very controlled explosions.
But
yeah,
they could have like a moment which is like, oh, you either get like the points of where it goes down, you get a Pointless answer, or there's a new one which is when the tower falls. And it's like,
it's just Jenga at this point. Yeah, I think I'm now this version of Pointless. Now I'm terrified to be on that show, and I don't know if I want to do that now. I rather take Takeshi's Castle at this point.
Yeah, my brain kind of went to Takeshi's Castle kind of vibes, but more like, and Craig might know a few in his head of like the kids shows you used to get like on CBBC, which I don't watch children's television, but you don't tend to get that as much anymore. Is what I used to want to do. I was like, I want to be on one of those things where you like run in, you have to run around this little maze thing at the end, and you have to climb up a wall, and there's like a gladiator style treadmill thing. I'm like, I want like that, like 50-50 or something, but to the death.
To the death.
Wait until you hear what show I want, David.
Okay, go on
then.
I want Golden Balls.
Oh God, yes, of course.
Yes.
Literally, the moment that you steal someone's life.
That wasn't too far off Golden Balls, to be fair. Like, I think I did put a tweet out a few weeks ago saying that Golden Balls is what give me trust issues. Well, I'm sure I would love to see all of these versions of these TV shows as psychotic as they are. But today we'll be talking about a very specific fictional game show, which we'll get on to very soon. And we can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts, and we can't wait to hear everyone at home what you think as well. So please do let us know, leave us a review, interact with us wherever you can, wherever you're listening, or on social media like Instagram and Twitter, where you can find us at Well Good Movies. So all really helps the podcast grow. It means we can see what you guys want to hear and what you enjoy most. So let's get on with what we are talking about. So Craig, for those who didn't catch our last episode, or those who need a reminder, what is it that we're discussing today?
So fittingly, after an Endgame where we talked about a variety of Sylvester Stallone quotes, because I originally thought that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the film that we discussed last week, but obviously wasn't. It was Sylvester Stallone. So in the end, the winner between Chris and Sarah was Sarah, but she decided to go with Chris's film choice, and Chris's film choice was an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, in which it was The Running Man.
In the year 2017, an innocent man accused of a crime has a choice. Hard time or prime time.
Sensational. Perfect contestant. I want him.
He must pay or play the running man.
On your mark.
I'll be back.
Go!
The highest rated TV show in history.
Guess they want us to stay.
It's a game between life and death.
Give you a lift?
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the running man. He's playing for a prize. The prize is his life.
How about the life?
The running man.
Also there with the whole choice aspect, like he has a choice. So the theme continues. So yeah, this film is The Running Man. It was released in 1987. It stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Richard Dawson. It was directed by Paul Michael Glaser. The original novel that this is based on was by Stephen King, and the screenplay is credited as being written by Stephen E. D'Souza. The soundtrack is by Harold Faltermeyer, and cinematography by Thomas Del Ruth, with editing by Mark Roy Warner, also known as Mark Warner, Edward A. Warshilker, and John Wright. The film also stars Maria Conchita Alonso as Amber Mendez, along with Yaphet Kotto, Jim Brown, Jesse Ventura, Erland Van Lidith, Marvin J. McIntyre, Gus Routhwish, and Professor Toro Tanaka as Sub-Zero. So we've got a professor in here as well as Mick Fleetwood, Dweezil Zappa, and Karen Lee Hopkins. So yeah, mainly is Schwarzenegger is the biggest star here, with more like kind of random actors then who are playing.
What are you talking about, David? I think they're all household names.
Well, Jesse Ventura, I know him from wrestling. So
exactly, I was going to say, maybe in the world of wrestling there's...
in the world of wrestling, when you see... And also, here's the thing that just got me quite excited when I first was about to hear it. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jesse Ventura have already done this before. They were in Predator beforehand. So, and I thought they were going to have more of a thing, but yeah, well, we'll talk about that when we get there.
Though, just coming off of that trailer, I think this is the best time to bring it up, because again, we discussed this in previous episodes of like, you know, he's the Demolition Man and, you know, etc., etc. That trailer as well said he is the Running Man. I'm like, is he? Is that ever said in the film that he is the Running Man? Like, I don't think he is the Running Man. That is the name of the show, not Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. He's even given a different nickname in this film.
I think it's one of those things where like it's unspoken, but every contestant that goes on becomes the Running Man.
Exactly, yeah.
I will say one thing, though, with this movie that kind of puts into it. Arnie does run a lot in this movie, and I realized something. I'm not sure if it's just me. Arnold has a little bit of a funny run. Like, it's not a super funny run, but it's a little awkward. It's a bit weird. Like, it's a little jiggity at points. And it's like, look at you, big man run. It just kind of makes me giggle.
I mean, he's a bit of a funny guy in general, let's be fair.
Yeah, just this big slab of meat just running across a field. And you know what? Made me giggle.
There is a lot of strange running in this film, and again, maybe that is down to like action set pieces or, you know, the sets, etc. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
But Johann, what was your initial reaction when I did mention this film? Have you got any memories or connection to it previously before discussing it today?
Okay, so it's a bit of a weird one with this, because when I was a kid, I was all into action movies, right? So it was Arnie, it was Schwarzenegger, it was Van Damme, it was Seagal, it was Willis. It's the action guys, right? So I've seen a lot of Arnie movies, except this one. So I got a little bit excited, but then also kind of thought, I almost thought, I swear I've seen this. I've never seen it. So this was my first time watching it. So my review through this basically is all going to be from a first time perspective. I know of it, and I know of some of the visuals and some of the lines and stuff like that, but I've never sat down and watched it. I don't know why this completely passed me by. So it was a surprise. So I was quite excited that when you gave me this one, because it would be another one from the Arnie list that I haven't watched.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one for once who liked the film. It's my first time seeing it.
It was a bit of a surprise, though, that I didn't get to see it. I thought I would have, but I never have.
And I think because there are so many of these Schwarzenegger films, which are, Arnie's face on a poster, it's all about him, you do feel that you have seen it in some way because there are so many similar films in which he's there front and center. So I think that has an element of it. And I think it's not like The Last Action Hero or something like, Predator, etc., in which it's very clear, like, that franchise, that film. Whereas The Running Man, it doesn't sound like something you would immediately associate with Schwarzenegger, especially because it's Stephen King, it's kind of dystopian future. It doesn't sound like his kind of usual shtick, but in a lot of ways, like you said, Johann, it is still the action hero kind of stuff, the explosives, all this kind of like 80s cheese, etc. So yeah, first time watch for me as well. And this one I went in a lot more blind compared to Demolition Man, in which I had seen the trailers, etc. Whereas this was pretty much like I just had seen like the picture of him in the outfit, and that was about it. So really went into
what
this.
An outfit! What an outfit, everybody! That's so tight.
Definitely so. So would you say, looking at this, then it is indicative of, we've already discussed, with Demolition Man, etc., that kind of genre of like action stars and big explosive movies, but also this taps into that kind of like 80s dystopian future, cheese kind of game show movie in which they're bringing in a lot of elements of the 80s. Do you think this is very indicative of that time in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I feel this is a movie that just screams 80s. In a weird way, you could not make this, it's almost to the point that it's so 80s, and I think it's doing it on purpose to a degree. I think it's a little bit, there is a satirical element to this movie, but there is also a little bit when I'm kind of thinking like, do you know how over the top and cheesy you've actually made this? Do you know how 80s you've actually made this? Because there are some bits where it's like, yeah, you're joking it, because especially stuff with like the TV media stuff and 80s commercials, that is pretty much satire. That's not even new because movies like RoboCop and other things started to do that beforehand. But, oh, God, the colors, the outfits, the actual slayers themselves, they're all ridiculous. I mean, you literally said, and my favorite, just because the name is Professor Toru Tanaka, aka Professor Sub-Zero, 10 out of 10, best movie ever made, just for the title alone. It is really cheesy 80s nonsense, but to the point that it almost become a parody of itself in a weird satirical way. If you did this exact level now, you'd think it's a joke. It's a joke. But here, I couldn't 100% be sure if they were in on the joke or it's all a satire and they're very much in on the joke. So I couldn't tell, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one for, like I said, encapsulating a lot of things that we have been discussing lately, and so many elements of kind of 90s, 80s, like action movies and Hollywood movie star films, in which it's taking, again, dystopian future, and using like a situation, like a very specific situation in which they're thrust into. There's also the element of like a convicted policeman, and like he needs to prove his innocence, and so this keeps coming up, but it still centers again around selling you on Schwarzenegger himself. And I felt that it was kind of weird watching this with the lens of Demolition Man from last time as well, especially whereas like I enjoy Demolition Man more, whereas Chris sort of brought in this film because of what it does, what he said was more successful here in terms of the satire and the messaging they were going with. So it was interesting in my mind to kind of like compare and contrast the two, because there are so many similarities between them.
Why do I feel like we're going to argue about this film again, David?
As I watched it, I was like, this is going to happen.
Oh, there's a death glare happening here. I want to add one thing though, because we're talking about being that it's selling itself as an Arnie movie, right? And to be honest, the downside of this movie to me is that at points it leans too much into the Arnie movie. And there's moments, the bit in the middle where it's not an Arnie movie and he's literally in the game show being nonsense is the best thing in the whole goddamn movie. It's hilarious and it's weird to see Arnie, big burly man, slightly out of his element. Like, yeah, he does beat up all the Slayers, but in a way that you can see he's totally out of his zone here. This is odd. And it makes me wonder, would this movie have done well if it wasn't starring Schwarzenegger? Like, would it have made more sense if it wasn't starring Schwarzenegger? Because then you can think, oh, it is, it's our battle of wits instead of big burly man going grr. Because when he's in there, it's like, oh, is he going to win? Like, of course he is. He's Schwarzenegger. He's the size of a house. You're already losing that element of like, could he lose on this game show? And there was slightly never the option he was going to lose on this game show unless it was like a big master twist. And then all the bits before and after the game show just fell into very typical Schwarzenegger territory.
Yeah, and that's where, again, recently we've talked about like movie stars. And I think of something like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, in which it's like, yeah, he's in Jungle Cruise or he's in Black Adam, in which people are kind of like, it was just Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, really. It's like, yeah, you could say he was playing a character to some extent, but largely people feel that they are watching that man, that character persona of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson rather than the actual character. And I think that is definitely an element with Schwarzenegger, and that was something we kind of alluded to last time, in which Stallone maybe has a bit more character to him in his projects because he's used to playing some more dramatic roles. And let's face it, Arnie isn't the same level of actor, and I think that this film does show he isn't the best actor, and he's there for a very specific purpose.
It's also a bit weird given that, let's face it, we probably have to address it quite early on. Obviously, this is a work that has essentially been originated by Stephen King, so there's always going to be like a level of nuance to what exactly the film is trying to say, which there are times in which they try to do that, but when you have Arnold Schwarzenegger trying to deliver that nuance and then like bookends it with some more of his stereotypical 80s like tagline, punchline sort of things, gets a bit weird. Like the scene that gets it for me most is when when he leaves Dynamo to live. He's like, I wouldn't kill a defenseless man like you. I was like, okay, this is him obviously trying to show his sort of character of he wasn't the butcher of Baker Street as he's been defined as. But when they're going off, it's like, oh, where's Buzzsaw? It's like, he had to split. I was like, there is such a tonal disconnect here. Like, why did you decide to have that in the edit? And then also later for him to kill like a defenseless person, he disables his flamethrower and is like, what a hothead.
It's like, I feel, and that's where I think that the tone of the film is like quite confused and the storyline could have been told a bit better, but it is almost as if you want him to turn to camera and wink, but you almost want the audience then to be enjoying that, like the actual audience of in the film. And it's like strange that they're not supporting him like until the very end.
That audience are the weirdest audience I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. But I know again it is that. I mean, the whole point of this is the reason why that section alone, the game show section, the TV show section, is the best bit, because that's where the satire is 100% on display. It is unabashed and literally there's no subtlety. In fact, the whole thing is no subtle. The idea of subtlety is out the window. But the audience, for example, just being ravenous dogs and being just being like so shallow in its choices, and how they're so easily manipulated by our host, who is this charismatic asshole and doesn't see it from the trees. And seeing, although admittedly, that audience, a lot of old ladies in that audience, which I think it's mostly because of him being like this old crooner guy and going, oh, I love the grannies. Oh, you're all lovely. Give me money. But it just kind of, it also, the tonal disconnect is when you see an old woman literally going, that's bull, literally just starting to swear, and everyone else is going, Jesus Christ.
It's before that when she's like, he's one mean motherfucker. I was like, wait, what?
It's so good. But it's like, it's funny because you didn't expect it. And it kind of leans into that kind of bloodthirsty, weird kind of satire of an audience just going with the flow and just having fun for the sake of it. Until it kind of goes on its head and turns when basically Schwarzenegger is actually beating up all the Slayers. And there's a weird thing. Another bit in that movie is like the first Slayer, basically, the first stalker gets killed off. And it's quiet because no one's killed one before. But then that makes me think, the other game show thing, there must have been fairly short episodes then. Have they never passed the first stalker? It makes a gigantic loophole. But then afterwards, after like, oh, this is now the third one he's killed, they're all now excited, going, yes! Yes!
I do actually think I have an answer to that short episode thing. Given that they brought in another sort of runner halfway through the show, I think what happens is somebody goes on, they might evade a stalker to the point of another one gets brought in and then get killed off. And then there's just like, let's bring on our next contestant.
They just keep going for the next 3 hours showing this thing.
The thing that I found weird with the audience is I understand them not cheering when the first stalker gets killed. I get that, and they're really silent. I'm a bit like, oh, wow, you are just really invested in these stalker personalities. I kind of understand that. But then when it's like he's umming and ahhing about whether to kill Dynamo, and then you just start seeing the audience go, kill him. I was like, okay, this is where they get bloodthirsty. But he kills another stalker and they're depressed again. I'm like, make up your minds.
They are a very fickle audience, which is probably part of the satire bit.
Yeah.
Like they'll just turn on a dime, and it means that the TV show has almost designed the perfect formula to keep that audience hungry. And when that formula changes, the audience doesn't know what to think, because they now having to change the script to the point where the bit that really does frustrate me near the end of the game show bit is where they fake a whole fight, which is both kind of genius, because one thing is, and I'll say one thing about this movie, which I could say has some positives to it, is that this movie, in its terms of its science fiction, was semi-accurate for quite a few of these things. Like, that fight is basically deep faking, isn't it? It's just a really convincing deep fake. And you could do that now. You can then do a deep fake with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jesse the Body Ventura having a squabble over it. And I said, again, first time seeing, going, that's deep faking. And they predicted this. They predicted that a while ago. So good on their sci-fi. I have to give them props for this movie, that their science fiction, not like it's accurate, because 2017 didn't look like that, thank God, but they predicted some bits of technology, or in a way that, it's manageable now, I think.
When the opening statement came up and it was just like, this is like the media controls this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, right, yeah, this pretty much is how we're living right now. But
pretty bad.
The fact that, I think that they could have been a lot more concrete in terms of like their world and like what they were trying to say and what the game show was meant to be. Because I think throughout this, because there's been so many films and stories which are about like either violent sort of like tournaments or games, or this type of like reality, hyper kind of like emphasized television show set in the future, which have done this a lot better. I think that's where, like, for me, a lot more of the holes like turned up. And I think especially because I think you are right in that the satire comes through the most, but I think it's interesting to think of what we make now as how that will be in 20 years time. Like, will a film that's meant to be in the future feel like, oh wow, this is what you thought the future would be? You can I don't think it's even that, because again, we talked about this with Demolition Man, is that idea of like, oh, isn't that funny, like they thought that this would happen, and it turns out that actually is a thing, blah 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 blah. But I think the production values can still give you an idea of like, okay, they have pulled off a vision of the future quite well. Whereas I think the problem for this film is that I still felt like I was in the 80s the majority of the time, especially because it's almost like they've taken a concept which is so close to the 80s and shown that in the future it dates it immediately, if you know what I mean. So it's almost as if they've gone like, oh, imagine if like wired telephones became this like huge massive thing and that was like the enemy of a film or something. You would watch that now and go, well, wired telephones are not even a thing anymore, so it immediately dates that concept. So I think that the whole 80s television show vibe just immediately screams 80s television show. And as Craig reminded me before recording, the fact that they got Richard Dawson, who hosted Family Feud, that is giving you that idea, that parody there, that they obviously wanted to have that kind of television game show vibe. All the old ladies, all the old people in the audience is giving you that vibe, but it doesn't scream sci-fi to me. It doesn't scream kind of like futuristic, especially because most people are just dressed quite normally as well. So it was a weird mix for me, and I thought that, like I said, I think they pulled it off quite well with some of the satire, but a lot of the time I didn't think it worked, in that I felt that this was an original world or an original concept.
I just don't think of this as sci-fi, so that's where I think I sidestepped a lot of those issues.
If you don't see it as very strong, like hard sci-fi, like it's not like very obviously pushing itself as a science fiction, it's pushing it more as a dystopian movie with some elements of it because of like, you know, because of how it all works, right?
I think the problem with that though is that like 1 minute you've got the dystopian future thing, the next minute you've got a man walking around like a Christmas tree. So I'm like, are you going for crazy, you know, futuristic, like, you know, Mad Max stuff, or you go in for like just dystopian future, you know, things are a bit crap? It's like, that's the weird mix I found.
Well, the game show, the thing that constantly made me remind, and this is why when you got Jesse Ventura playing Captain Freedom, which one, great name. Secondly, we never get to really see him fight, which really upset me as a professional wrestler. But then I said to myself, when you got, let's go for the name, shall we? Because I love these names. First of all, Captain Freedom. That's one. You've got Eddie Buzzsaw, which is amazing. You've got Professor Sub-Zero. You've got Dynamo and Fireball. They are quite literally like, they're literally like the version of gladiators, like Wolf and all that kind of stuff. But they're also professional wrestlers. These are the big gravitas, the entrance, the backstory, the over-elaborate thing, the heels, the good guys. It's all professional wrestling, which was, again, a very 80s thing. It was huge in the 80s. That kind of level of like Hulk Hogan level gear. And also having a wrestler already being one of them just emphasized that even more. So I can see like, it's like we said right from the beginning, it's a movie that is very much of its time and very stuck in its sort of things from the 80s in a way that it's comfortable, but it's like, oh, it's the future, but it's comfortable because it's not too weird in the future. It isn't going to be that weird. We're still going to have some of these things you really like, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also going to make this comparison because I think I'm going to start the fight here. I do just think that their dystopian vision of the future comes off as more realistic than Demolition Man, because I made it very clear during that episode that I did not think that they had a reasonable grasp of what would necessarily be like dystopian, what would necessarily happen in the future. I thought they went so outlandish that it kind of lost me. Here, it is a world in which it's just a military state that tries to just keep power via just keeping a TV show that specifically feeds the audience exactly what they want insofar as like violence, at which point I'm just, you know what? I think that this is a plausible future that could necessarily come out. Obviously, we're reviewing the film in 2023, so we saw what 2017 was like. We know that didn't happen. So obviously that's going to like tarnish it, that's going to like remove it a little bit. At least I think that the idea of, say, some of the things that they have of like slave camps and also just like forcing criminals to their death, I actually think is strong commentary, especially insofar as like, because let's face it, we live in a society in which people talk about the idea of justice so much, but what they actually mean is just complete retribution. Society does not give a damn about things like rehabilitation whatsoever, so it makes perfect sense to me that there would be a criminal TV show where all they're doing is just cheering for these guys being killed, and even the ones who win the show still end up getting killed and just like left somewhere to die, at which point I I actually think that a lot of the commentary, even if it is done in really, really stupid ways for like commercial purposes, I think actually stands out quite a bit to me. The end speech by Killian, also what a name. He literally has kill in his name. Just sort of grabbed me insofar as like the way in which the media would operate in this world. And I'm like, yeah.
Like I said, the media part, especially the whole idea of the media lies to you. I love the fact how it's so obviously they're lying to you, how they really edited stuff in to give it a different narrative or added extra stuff to it. And you can even say, like, you know, Amber basically says all the time, like, that's a lie. I was there. That's a lie. Which is mostly her dialogue. Most of her dialogue is nonsense. It's nothing but, that's a lie. We need to stop the lie. That's literally all she says for half the movie.
They literally like grab her and being like, you are now the like damsel in distress, and chuck her into the game.
Go! Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's got strong commentary in that sense. It does. And it does have, and look, compared to Demolition Man is, I think Demolition Man is a parody of itself in that sense. It knows that the future, that kind of future is dumb. The future of how everyone's a pacifist in that sense is kind of a dumb future, and it couldn't really work that way. It's like, oh, it's a parody of what a utopia would be. This isn't a utopia. This is literally more realistic in terms of how it could have gone down the rabbit hole fairly quickly, but with over-elaborate, silly, very 80s style kind of vibe to the whole thing, with the show being its pinnacle point.
Yeah, I think that definitely it is a more, like I said, realistic future, and I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head there, like Johann, in terms of like Demolition Man sort of like using that kind of like knowing the silliness of that future, which I think comes down to just like whether you enjoy that concept or not. So I think that the only problem I have with the game show and just the entire idea of it being like it's the biggest TV show in the country and, you know, it's taken everyone by storm, I was like, I never really felt like I saw that. And similar to Demolition Man, again, I'm like, what is with these films and not really showing the plight of the people who are oppressed? I'm like, this film could have done with like maybe another 15 minutes maybe to develop that kind of like dystopian future, I think, because they go so straight into the show. And I think even the villain, like Killian, I'm like, he's a TV presenter, but it's like I brought up Hunger Games last time. I'm like, it's like if the villain of like the entire Hunger Games was Caesar, is it, the character played by Stanley Tucci, if he was just the only villain of it. I'm like, I don't see him as that threatening, because he's just a business guy who's like, hey, this is just entertaining television, which is a good concept and it works, but I don't feel that it's like, I can't buy into the fact that he's controlling this entire city or this world, and I don't really see how the people are kind of oppressed that much.
He has a significant amount of military contacts. Like, he literally has these people under his thumb. I can completely understand why it is that he basically controls he literally controls everything, even if it's like in a secret way.
Yeah, I think conceptually, like it is there, but I just would have liked a bit more like showing of how, I think even just being more on the nose, that literally like a media company is literally the government or something like that. They could have just been a bit more linked together to show how like it was all kind of like one central problem. I think it's just, for me, there was just the fact that we just never saw much of the dystopian future. We didn't see the civilization all that much. Like the fact that the audience was mainly the only time that we saw those people. So even like when you see them like putting bets on like towards the end, and I was like, why would they have never betted against, like, because I don't even understand why the show didn't really want them to win. Like, this is the problem I think I have with the concept with the gladiators thing. I think, like you said, Johann, it is fun, and I think that it like works for the silliness of like, oh, there's all these like wrestlers and stuff like that. It is great, and it makes for some stupid, ridiculous stuff. But I think they should have really really embraced it more. I think that they should have like brought in the celebrity culture bit of it more. They should have shown how people were obsessed with them. They should have really made the show, and before they went in, all about that. Similar again to how Hunger Games quite effectively goes. People are obsessed with these like celebrities that have come from it, and they like grow them up to be these type of like god type figures. And it's like, well, let's then show how people react when they are like killing each other, etc.
I think they do, though.
It has a bit of that. It's the idea again, like they have the big entrances and they're treated like professional wrestlers. There's one bit where Buzzsaw does like knock a fan over and he's like, he touched me. He really touched me. But it might just need a little more. I get it. It's a little bit more. You need a little bit more, like as if you want maybe one on a talk show beforehand. You like imagine, Dynamo does a whole operatic moment on a talk show and says like and talks about that kind of thing or whatever it is, or you have Fireball doing commercials, because we did get one of Captain Freedom doing the best cardio commercial. Oh, he's in the tightest. Again, everyone's in the tightest of outfits, but it's great. I think I see what you mean. Just a tiny bit more of that, perhaps, could have given us like, yeah, we know all these people, because sometimes we're suddenly just introduced to Fireball. Cool. We're suddenly introduced to Dynamo. Although personally, I like the fact that Dynamo just turns up. He's just a slightly rounder man who sings opera and does electric shocks in the most ridiculous outfit I've ever seen. I like the surprise element to a degree, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more of a recurring, other than Captain Freedom, who doesn't really get a real fight. Damn it!
I do think that there are other subtle things that happen. So the fact that the audience are the one who get to choose which stalkers are brought in the first place, I think does hint at that a lot. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, obviously this sort of format of dystopian future where a massive game show is used to control the masses is definitely done better by Hunger Games. And I think the fact that Hunger Games came out when it did and basically just allowed us to sort of make the critiques of what it is we want from this in the first place definitely is like a fault against this film. But I know I put myself in the mindset of just trying to enjoy it for the time. And I do think that, like, compared to sort of other ridiculously stupid sort of 80s blockbuster films, that there is just at least something here which is a bit deeper, but still quite entertaining, let's be fair.
There's something there, but then, like I said, the tonal shift happens where you get the really, like, like the commentary and the social and everything there and the good that could have built there is great. But then you also have to remember it's an Arnie movie, so all the one-quip liners, the silly amount of gore, not like gore, but I just find it really funny. Like everyone has their own zone and it's all really hilarious. Like Professor Sub-Zero is actually on a hockey field, and I absolutely loved that. And how they're like, oh no, and like the teacher guy gets trapped in a goal. It's absolutely hilarious. Or how Buzzsaw, you have Buzzsaw and you have Buzzsaw, and literally there he is on a motorcycle running down miles per hour with a chainsaw in his hand, and literally getting split in half by the groin. By the way, which is, I did wince. Because I didn't went to that bit, and now I was like, and there I am being maybe like partly like the crowd going, yes, that's exactly what I want. I want nasty, but it does tonally when they go into, we need to talk about the resistance again. It's like, it doesn't work. What are the other? Either silly or serious. You can't be silly serious.
And I think to go back to what we were saying about the concept of the show, etc., I think you were saying, Johann, I think I thought the same thing of like, what? Nobody has ever been killed on this before. How? I think if they had set up more the idea of like in my head canon, it was kind of like, it's the running man. Maybe the people are always running. I think it's quite tricky when they say that like they put ex-criminals in there, because you then think, well, somebody must have tried to fight back. Whereas if they had made it so that it was always kind of civilians and like it was like a predator hunter kind of situation of people are literally always running because they just don't have the physical capabilities to take these people on. And then Arnie's character is like the first actual military man or policeman to go in there and actually be like, I can fight back against these guys. I think that could have worked quite well. Like I think of something a bit like Tron Legacy, in which you get like all the crowd is like, yeah, go, Rizzler or whatever they call him in Tron Legacy, in which like this world is kind of supporting the villains. And then this kind of hero comes along, which we as an audience support, but we immediately get the idea of like, oh, like the world that they're in a dangerous world. They are the odd one out here. Whereas I think this film struggles with like, are we meant to support them? Are people against them? I don't know. Because again, the audience reactions were just so weird. I think it would have just been more clear if they had bigged up those gladiator type characters and shown how much people loved them and hated Arnie, then it would have made more clear that like, oh, he is an underdog here. He's just like fighting for his life kind of thing. I think it even makes it more busy and confusing that they throw in his friends in there. I'm like, just keep it to him.
I'm gonna quit back against that. One, I think you obviously have to take into consideration that the people that the show and this government deem as criminals, right? I think it is very clear that in many situations they are just trying to get rid of dissidents, right? The fact that they make up this entire story around like Amber's character, at which point they just seem to throw her in. Two, I do think it is established, again, not to great detail, but I do think that they actually big up why it is that, say, Ben's character is particularly hated, given A, you already see the scene beforehand where civilians are talking to him and he's just like, are we really meant to be helping you? You're the butcher of Baker Street.
Yes.
And then two, in his introduction, they actually physically show that he's the butcher of Baker Street, and then you have the entire crowd sort of booing him for that. I do think that these things exist. I don't think it is fair to say because they didn't do much of it doesn't exist at all.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all. I think it's just like Johann, etc. said. I think it just needed a bit more here. It needed a bit more there just to kind of make the ideas a bit clearer. Like even the fact that he is the butcher of Baker Street, etc. I'm like, that even confuses it. It's like just, I think you're right, Craig. I think that there's obviously elements there that they're saying this person's a problem, like somebody who, I don't know, was going to uncover a secret or something, like a lawyer. If they showed somebody like that being put in there, it would make clear that like they're putting ordinary, troublesome people in there. And then again, Arnie goes in there as like, oh, this is the first time we have somebody who's like trained to do this. But the fact that they label him as the butcher of Baker Street, it's already making him like the gladiators in a way. So you're a bit like,
I think the best way to describe it is like, if this movie wasn't an Arnie movie, all the stuff you'd said would have been in there.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was thinking when you said that. Yeah.
We're an Arnie movie, so we don't have time for world-building nonsense. We need Arnie doing Arnie things. So while it's all in there, let's say, especially from the beginning and the end bits, right? That's rushed through. It's like, we mention it, let's just put little seeds in there, but not enough that we could develop the world enough to like really go into detail and fill in the gaps you're wanting. We need to get to the action sequence. We need to get to the action sequence. We don't have time for not having an action sequence, have Arnold Schwarzenegger and a bunch of other people trying to explain the sci-fi, dystopian world-building nonsense. We don't have time. Let's bring the guy dressed up like a hockey player to chop people's heads off. We need no time. There's literally no time. And the movie is quite breezy. It's about an hour and 40 minutes long.
Exactly.
If, like I said, if it wasn't starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and it was someone else completely and it was following more the Stephen King vibe of it, I bet you there would have been another 20 more minutes with all the stuff you've mentioned. But we don't have time. Arnold's here, and he can barely act in some cases. There's a bit where he rips out the TV and he's shouting at Killian, which is amazing. But for some reason, even though he's angry, it sounds hilariously wooden. Yeah. But really wooden, but like shouty wooden. I've never heard him do it this way.
And I find it weird again. There's like, I think that's where I found the connectors, the villain, a bit difficult, because it didn't seem like he was principally responsible for what happened to him in terms of him getting arrested and all that kind of stuff. And he was like the one that he was pinning this kind of like anger towards.
I mean, the reason why he's putting his anger is because he's the one who saw him running from the prison, saw just a videotape and going, I want that man on my show because look at that big cutie pie, that big burly man of beef run across a field. And that's literally it. He's Arnold. You've already know he's going to go in there and beat them. I mean, and the one he doesn't beat, again, the one with Captain Freedom, the one I really wish was real, didn't actually happen. And it was a body double. And I'm like,
And I did like the joke when he comes in and he, like, I don't know, he used some sort of human cheese grater or something. He's like, I'm not doing this. And I was like, this is fun. Like, I like that idea of that. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, you've made us up to be this, like, these stupid characters. And the things you've given us to make us like, I'm the fire guy, I'm the ice guy. It's like, you're actually holding us back. I'm like, that's quite cool. Like, it's the idea of, it's
again, in wrestling, it's the wrestling gimmick. If there have been some bad wrestling gimmicks in the world, right? There have been literally the Repo Man, for example. That's an actual old school wrestler, the Repo Man. Or you are a garbage man today, but you're a wrestler, but you're a garbage man. Or IRS, you're literally the tax man. but you are also a wrestler. So it's not too far off to having Jesse the Body Ventura come in and say, look, I don't want to dress up in any nonsense. I don't want this gimmick. I could fight him legitimately, properly. Why are you having to dress me up and do something different? I am Captain Freedom. I've been doing this for a long time. I know my own gimmick. I know my own worth. Which is interesting because when he has that conversation afterwards, then you get another big burly security guard, which I'm thinking, he must be another wrestler. I thought for a second he was also another stalker just dressed in like security guard wear. And then he just goes and said, no, we're just all, we're all just idiots, all slabs of beef, and just walk off. It's a great little bit. I'm going to remember those. I'm going to remember the stalkers because they're just ridiculous and dumb, but I'm not going to remember like, I'm not going to remember it as like, I'm only going to remember those moments as being little fun, little quirky bits because it's so random and it's just over the top. It's not, the Stalkers don't have anything to say other than just being professional wrestlers, basically. They're just literally characters. So I'm not expecting them to be full-blown, like, memorable other than Captain Freedom. That didn't really get much time. But yeah, it kind of ends, for me, this is the problem with me. Once the game show ends and they fake the fight, the whole thing then just becomes a bit bland at the end. Like, you'll go through it, but I'm like, we missed the most exciting bit is the game show bit. The thing at the beginning, not enough time for it. And at one point, you can just see it's Arnold because he's walking around holding a cigar, just talking nonsense. And the prison break and everything else. It's fine. It's fine. And then after the game show's over, they just go, oh, we're just going to storm the TV studio. It doesn't feel as exciting as let's literally fight a giant Christmas tree. It's not the same. It's not the same. And I feel like another example could be if at that moment that game show feels more like an over-elaborate video game. And this has actually become a video game to some degree. If anyone ever played Smash TV, like old school Smash TV, which was like literally like a top-down version of that thing where you go into different rooms and there's like beat up all the guys and then there's more and there's like a big boss in every kind of room. It has that vibe to it. It's a game show. And I feel like it should have been like a video game where the whole thing was the game show, building up and building up and building up until the big boss. And yeah, we're supposed to get that the TV executive Killian is the big boss here, but it didn't feel as satisfying as when you were fighting the big professional wrestler people.
And also,
if that made sense, if that makes sense. I mean, that's to me anyway.
And if like Arnie came out for like the final boss, and that's when people realized that he was real. Because the only problem I had with like, I get the idea that they were like, oh, the rebels are able to show people what they're really seeing. But I was like, but you've just shown us a deep fake which looked quite realistic. How would people necessarily see that and go, yeah, that is legitimately the truth. That's what happened, because they both pretty much looked believable, I guess, because of the way they've managed to edit it and stuff. So I think it would have been more effective if they just showed Arnie coming out or something like, he's alive, you thought he was dead, etc. That would have worked maybe a bit better.
But he does slightly appear to the point of at least the people in the game show studio know he's there, so they're up, and then obviously their reactions are still being broadcast sort of along this. So presumably they just go out and also just say, no, like, there's just so many of us now.
I mean, in spite of that, though, it's still being broadcasted out because you have different audiences. You've got the betting audience, which is like, or which is literally like the slums. You've got one in the middle of like outside, like in a plaza somewhere, which I found very perplexing. And then you got one which clearly like a rich person's house, right? And you've got them, right? And they're all broadcasting, which makes me feel in a funny way, like even though all this chaos is happening, there's still one person up there in the TV room just doing some mixing, going, now I'm going to switch to camera, get to close up. Killian's about to be thrown into the pit. Close up on that, please. I can just imagine someone directing that as it went.
I do have to ask, obviously when he gets thrown in like the transport thing that they use to send into like the actual arena,
which is amazing,
and it just goes flying into a billboard sign and blows up. I do have to ask, what was behind that billboard sign to cause that explosion?
Dynamite. Just all the dynamite. And you know what? Who cares?
That line as well. And he's like, well, that hit the spot. It's like, but the ending thing is also just like, this happens again in so many of these films. Again, we had it in Demolition Man of just like, film ends with pop song. And it's just like, okay.
Film ends with pop song and male, female inevitably hooking up.
Yeah, and it kind of think, like, going through that, I know you've been through a horrible scenario together, but, it wouldn't make you want Nookie. I know, that's just me. I wouldn't see, like, oh, big burly man saved my life a few times, let's go and bonk. It doesn't feel like there's not romance there. It just happened because it's an Arnie movie and they have to end it that way.
Okay, take those cassettes, rewind them, and play them again, because it's VHS Corner. So this week, I'll be talking you through some of the behind-the-scenes tidbits about this film. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of areas that we've already touched on. I think it'll be good for us to sort of elaborate. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we all know that Stephen King wrote the novel this film is based on under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. However, there was one person who did not know this. It was Rob Cohen. When purchasing the rights to the novel, The Running Man, he had no idea that it was actually a pseudonym for Stephen King. So he bought it without actually knowing of that very, very pivotal connection. That may explain a lot of the choices that are made in this film henceforth. Next up, I think we probably need to talk about some of the casting, because I think it's safe to say we are all somewhat in love with like a lot of the stalkers, especially Johann, talking specifically about the love for wrestlers. Couple of things about like their actual connections to things that they do in the film actually relating to their real life. So to start with, Erland van Lith, who plays Dynamo, was actually a classically trained Helden baritone opera singer. So in his introduction, when Dynamo is singing an aria from The Marriage of Figaro, that is actually him singing, which is ironic considering we call into question, is he saying some of the things he's singing? But is actually his singing. And this was also his final movie, as well as Richard Dawson's final movie as well. Let's now talk about Professor Sub-Zero, because obviously we have to talk about why is he a professor. Because he is played, obviously, by Professor Toru Tanaka. It's worth noting that Tanaka's title of professor is not from a postdoctorate academic rank, but rather his wrestling name that he went under in his wrestling career from the 1960s through the 80s. Sometimes shortened to Professor Tanaka. So obviously they were giving him some homage there, letting him keep that specifically. Now, Fireball, when Killian is sending him into the game, he says, there he goes, the leading rusher. Fireball was played by Jim Brown, the NFL's all-time leader in rushing yards until the mid-80s. So brought in a footballer and give a footballer terminology for him specifically. One behind the scenes casting that we've not really sort of discussed at all, I think it probably comes from the scene that I have a lot of I give a lot of credit to. It's obviously the first scene where like he's gone into the ranks and they're having the bombs removed from around the neck. So they go and meet a character called Mick, who is played by Mick Fleetwood, as in the Fleetwood Mac. And that character specifically talks about the fact that, well, one, he is British. Two, he talks about the fact that Ben was one of the cops who locked up my friends and burned my songs. So it is heavily implied that Mick is actually just Mick Fleetwood, and because Fleetwood Mac is no longer a thing in this world, he's now having to turn to like underground sort of bomb defusal work, which I think is like a really cool touch. But again, it's one of those things that will forever be known as, would it be nice if they elaborated it on? One thing that I wish they didn't elaborate on, and I thought this is one thing I thought they spent way too much time with, is the introductory dance sequences for the game show itself. Those sequences went on forever. And the reason they went on forever is because they were choreographed by Paula Abdul. So very, very famous dance choreographer. And many of the dancers in the films were friends of hers from the Laker Girls. So again, very much embracing sort of that real world culture in order to make this film stand out. I already mentioned it briefly, but I just want to actually give it like some credence. So specifically, it was mentioned that 4 actors from the Predator film franchise appear in this film. So you have Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura, Sven Ole Thorsen. They all appear in the original The Predator. And then Maria Conchita Alonso appears in Predator 2. So a significant amount of the cast sort of overlap with Predator. And finally, I think probably my favorite fact about this is because we mentioned the idea that, say, this has a very sort of American Gladiators look to it. The reason for it is because the TV American Gladiators, which started in 1989, was basically inspired by this film. So it's very much an offshoot of this film. The idea that we're praising the wrestler-like characters with those dynamic sort of names came from this film, as well as already mentioned the Smash TV arcade game, which was released in 1990. So this film has a lot more of a cultural background to it than I initially thought going into it, because like everyone else, I wasn't too sure of what this film was, but at the point it inspired basically one of my favorite concept of TV shows. I think it's fairly intriguing. But yeah, that is everything for VHS Corner for this week.
Woohoo.
Craig already making his pitch for the movie vault there, I think. But yeah, that Mick Fleetwood thing is interesting actually, because that was the character I was talking about with the weird voice, and I saw him like in the credits, and I was like, is this Fleetwood Mac, like that guy? So that would make sense, because maybe it's like the Pirates films, you know, where like you get like Keith Richards show up and you're like, this,
he shows up once.
Like it's like so weird and like out of place. Maybe that's why he stands out like a sore thumb and has like a weird sort of standout voice.
But also he mentions having a wife called Stevie, and it's heavily implied that's Stevie Nicks.
Yeah. I love the idea of that. Basically, he's running a rebellion because basically his band split up and all the music has now been removed because of this totalitarian.
Yeah. When he said
government.
the thing about they burned my songs and stuff, I was like, this is a fun idea. It was just, I just found it strange how it just seemed like he was voiced over. That's all I found. Like,
there's a bonfire somewhere, just with a whole bunch of Fleetwood Mac vinyls just slowly going to a crisp. And just one of the bits, because I love the main fact I loved is the Paula Abdul dancing, and the reason why is because I love there's a scene I did laugh a lot, and I did laugh for the dancers last forever, which are, you know, they're good dancers but get to the action. But there's a bit when Arnold comes out for the first time and all the dancers are dancing around him, and there's one particular person that makes me laugh the most. There's one person who just quite literally just does a big high kick right next to him and just leans her leg next to him, and it happens out of nowhere while he's walking, and for some reason that really made me burst, because out of all the dance moves you could have possibly done, so running around, you say high kick splits, baby, and it's just you're going, well, what a routine. Just all these girls just running around being very distracting. It's so funny imagining that every time a contestant comes out. Oh, made me giggle.
I didn't actually mind the long dancing because I thought it added to the vibes they were going for of like this ridiculous TV show. I think it's like the only thing that lets that down is the set, that they're like literally just in a TV studio. I'm like, it's almost as if the dance sequences suggest that's what they really wanted, was like this big stage or something like that, like an arena or something. But my favorite bit, which they use the dancing for, is when, again, this is where I think the parody or satire could have worked a bit better if they did more of this, was when the dancers came back and they were in red and they were like, we mourn the loss of, like, you know, like Fireball, and they're like doing like these kind of like interpretive dance. I was like, this is funny. Like, I think that works well.
Going back to wrestling slightly, it reminds me of, okay, in WCW, if you watch Monday Night Nitro, there used to be something called the Nitro Girls, where in between matches, just so they had to fill some time, there were just a bunch of sexy ladies just dancing in the ring. And it's just literally that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's going like, we need some distraction, we need cheerleaders, get some sexy girls in the ring while we figure out what match we're doing next.
It reminds me of in school where you know, like when the school's like, oh, we have no budget to do things, and like, how are we gonna like get over like having like a fire in like a scene or something like that? So one of the school plays that my school did was, their solution was like a bunch of girls would come out in like these kind of like ballet kind of outfits with like tassels of red, and like you have this like song playing which is like all orchestral, and they're like pretending to be the flame and going around and like whipping their hands on like the paper buildings that are on the curtain and stuff. It reminded me of that vibe of being like, ooh, we're gonna like demonstrate what the emotions are through dance.
Brilliant. So yeah, I just thought when you mentioned that all done by Paula Abdul, I thought that's great. It's kind of made now a little bit more sense with the cheerleading dance squad. So yeah, thank you for that one. That was my favorite fact out of that.
And also the dynamo, I felt that I was like, I feel he is singing. That's why I found it funny that it didn't seem like he was ever talking. So the thing I immediately thought of, especially thinking of Craig, was like, would the modern equivalent to this be like, Gio Compario, like the Go Compare Man, being in like one of these game shows? Would he be like the equivalent to this?
What a contestant.
But yeah, and also I noted down that the Professor Sub-Zero, so the man who plays him having professor in his title but not having a doctorate, is incredible Tommy Wiseau vibes. Just like, who is this guy? Like,
I would love it in character though. I know it's just his character, but I would love it if Professor Sub-Zero literally is like, he's got a doctorate. He's gone to Antarctica. He has learned the art of Sub-Zero, and he's come back to take in revenge. But also, he's just very good at hockey. So, yeah.
It kind of makes me laugh that we've had so many failed, well, a matter of opinion, I suppose, but like especially the last one, like failed Mortal Kombat films in which it's like Sub-Zero. They're like, we want him to be a thing. He's such a cool character in the games and stuff. And then I watched this. I was like, he's right there, man. Just take this version. This is what the cinema-going audience wants.
We want Professor Sub-Zero, please.
So, that is this week's trivia. So that means we go on to our section, which is the Movie Vault, to wrap up our thoughts of today's film. So for new listeners or guests, we like to think of this as our time capsule of films good, sometimes bad, that should be remembered for someone to dig up in the future. Maybe it deserves its fame, maybe it's been forgotten, or maybe it's great but just doesn't quite fit the bill. So should The Running Man from 1987 gain the honor of a place in our Movie Vault and be remembered for all time? So I might put Johann in the situation in which we kind of put Chris and Sarah last week in maybe the deciding vote, because I think it's maybe kind of clear in which way me and Craig go in with this. But Craig,
Ooh.
Well, the thing is, all right, I'll be honest. I came into this episode going to say no.
Oh.
I agree with everything that's been said in that I think that there is potential. I just don't know how much of it has been realized. I think upon hearing you slate this film so much when Demolition Man really deserved the same level of critique, and instead you let it fly by on the idea of just, you know what, I think it is fun. I think it does these things, and then you sort of allowed it to get in on those grounds. I'm just going to put my foot down. I think that at the point where this film attempts those things, but still tries to do it in a way in which is going to be somewhat taken up by the general audience. So at least exposing them to this, as opposed to like outlandishly stupid concepts for like 80s films, or just even no concepts, and it's just put people in situations where they fight and shoot guns, etc. I'm going to defend it and basically say that I think that this starts the idea of game shows being used as like satire. So I'm going to argue Hunger Games would not have happened without a film like this. So screw it. I'm going to say I think it should go in. Plus also everything we found out about how much impact it did have on culture afterwards.
I think what I find interesting, though, if it was to go in, to be fair, which is where I am a bit torn, and this has only come from the conversation because like Craig, I came in like, no, is that I think it is quite a good example of, like I said, as opposed to Demolition Man, as you said, is that it's so focused on like, it's an Arnie film and what would it be without Arnie, and it's such a breezy, fun time, and then you oppose it to this other film, which I felt was quite a cheesy, fun time, maybe not breezy, because it's a longer film, but both films suffer equally in both ways, and I think obviously Craig had a lot of problems with the concept and the messaging of Demolition Man, which I felt wasn't there as much, even though that reading I think is possible. But I tend to agree with Johann that possibly there's just that idea of taking over policing and, you know, the kind of like being too peaceful, that idea. I think that was there. I think that Stallone was like a better kind of lead. I think there were better characters in that film. I think it was more fun. It was more cheesy, better jokes. So on that basis of comparison, I think The Demolition Man is the better film. But I can't deny that, you know, this is more breezy and it is very indicative of a lot of what we've been talking about. But I think ultimately, I think it's just as a film in itself, I just don't think it commits to its ideas well enough. And I think that, yes, while those ideas are there, I just feel that those have been done better by other films. And it doesn't seem to want to commit to anything enough, whereas I think that Demolition Man, at least I could give the credit of being like, well, you're embracing this, Johan?
Oh boy. Okay, let me do my working out and let me figure this out. So, watching it for the first time, I kind of already knew to a degree how it influenced stuff. Like, there's certain pieces of technology which is predicted. Like the idea of the prisoner bracelet things, and obviously like the deep fakes and almost to a degree reality TV. It predicted quite a little bit of those things. So sci-fi wise, it has a level of influence in there. It also has an influence on things like other media and, video games, movies, you name it. I'm thinking of another video game right now from the Wii called Mad World, if anyone remembers that. Very similar vibes as well. So this concept is good. But does it make the movie good? And that's the question. Do we like the concept more than the movie? And this is where I fall into it. The concept's amazing. It's a great concept. And it's strong enough that it lives in spite of the movie itself. Because when you talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, no one says in the first get-go, Running Man's amazing. It's one of those movies that, as an Arnie movie, it's kind of on its lower end of this thing in terms of what do people instantly remember and what do people instantly reference. And so for me, that's where I'm going to go with it. Its concept's really good, but then you can take a concept out. You can take the concept out whatever you want, but is the movie good? And the movie is slightly, while it's got really good bits, it's a little bit too confused, or it doesn't commit enough in some of the bits it could have done. And again, if it wasn't an Arnie movie, could have been better. But because it's an Arnie movie, and I'm going to compare it to other Arnie movies, it doesn't hit the landing for me. And I think other movies before and after, things like, being manipulated by the media, the other movies that do that bit very particularly well, for example. The idea of things like television, the idea of the criminal sort of like game show vibe, that even though it started off here, they were done better afterwards. And if you were going to put maybe one other movie of that into the vault, I don't think it necessarily has to be this one, because there's other movies that kind of do it better. I think it was this close. Can I just say that? It's this close. But I don't think it needs to go into the vault.
For the audience at home, when Johann's saying it's this close, his finger and thumbs are quite far apart. I just want to make it clear.
It's actually this wide. No, but it's a pretty close call, but thinking about it as an Arnie movie and thinking about its influence, it's the concept we really love, not the movie. And so you can use a concept, but doesn't mean just because one concept's strong means we have to put the whole movie in there.
No,
so
and I think that
I'm going to say no.
I think that's where, again, and that's where I could have been swayed, where I was saying that the conversation maybe be like, oh, well, it is quite interesting to compare these two films, how they differ, etc. But I think we have discussed before as well about an influence of a film and its legacy. But if we take something else like Avatar, which I always go to, which we didn't give credit for that, in which we say, well, the film still needs to work on its own, regardless of what it did outside of that. So I was kind of willing to give it a bit of a pass on the sense of okay, it is influenced a lot as part of not just one thing, like Avatar, you could say. But I think you bring up a good point with the whole Arnie film element of it, of you're basing it on this is what it is, and the fact that it's not the best of those, I think that maybe there would be a better film to contrast to Demolition Man. So
I was going to say I'm fine with it not going in, and then you started speaking again, and I'm just no.
Wow. Okay. I was going
to
say Craig came into this saying no, so that also cements my opinion, and I was I think Johann has convinced him, but yeah, obviously I opened my mouth. So Johann, just say everything again, and then we'll go to me saying no.
No, not say everything again.
Just copy and paste what I just said, and then I'm just going to say, yeah.
So, okay.
So, like, look, I agree. I don't think the film should go into the vault. It just means I'm going to work through hell and high water to get Demolition Man out one day.
He's good. Or he works with hell and high water to get something else in, or to get that film to contrast it. We need another Arnie film to pit it against it in there somehow. So, okay, the consensus.
Oh, I mean, there are easy choices if you're going to go for that. Presumably, something like Predator, I imagine, would be like the easiest sell.
We shall see. So, but for this week, unfortunately, The Running Man does not go into the movie vault. Do you agree? Another contentious one like last time. Let us know at home. But now we get to our final face-off, our final challenge, which is this week's Endgame.
We're in the Endgame now.
It's so annoying.
Okay, Endgame time. So this one I've beautifully just called Arnie's grasp on language. Because obviously he's well known for, I think, playing up his Austrian accent and playing up the idea that his English is a bit broken, which is the nice way of saying it. Whereas he can actually speak fluent English. And also, very much like with Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger is someone who has a catalogue of memorable quotes. So I thought it would be fun to have a game in which we sort of marriage the two aspects of his personality. There was no way in an audio format I could bring in his bodybuilding experience or his governing of California. So it's going to have to be language and quotes. What I've done is I've taken several of his film quotes and I've translated them over and over and over into different languages, and then translated back into English.
You monster!
So, just to be clear, these are the languages. Sometimes in this sequence, sometimes I've randomized the sequence in order to get the funnier results. So English to German, because German is his second language, as he is from Austria. German into French. French into Italian, because, right, here, stay with me on this. They are some of the national languages of Switzerland. Switzerland is an inspiration for where his surname is from. So he is Schwarzenegger because he is a person from Schwarzenegg, or Schwarzenegg, which basically means that his surname is somewhat from Switzerland. So I decided to embrace that. I then translated that all into Greek, because Greek is where the word barbarian came from, and obviously one of his first introductory roles was Conan the Barbarian. Into Albanian, because...
Just because!
And then after all of that, I translated it back into English.
Brilliant.
So the game is simple. I'm going to give you what that quote is. I want you to metaphorically buzz in first and say what you think the exact quote that is from. And I'll give you a bonus point if you can say the film or film franchise it is from.
Okay.
Okay, so is everyone clear on the rules?
Yes.
Cool. Well, I'll give you time to digest that because, first of all, we need to know what it is we'll be playing for. As usual, you get the opportunity to decide what film it is we discuss in next episode. So it can be one of your choices or one of my choices. So, David, tell us a little bit about the film that you would suggest.
So my film, we're going back to the 90s again. It's from 1998. This film has quite a few links to actually some of the recent films we've had. Rush Hour had this song, which was also used in this movie with War, What Is It Good For? Also, the Demolition Man and the Running Man have both used the themes of like government intervention and, you know, when they've gone too far and like violence, etc. This movie definitely has that. And there's also the element of the action hero, which we said with Demolition Man and also with Arnold Schwarzenegger, especially a lot of the time, they are very much like literal G.I. Joe, action men, action figure type people. So this movie literally is encapsulating that idea of the soldier action figure. And it's taken to a crazy degree in which you get, you know, a fantastic director who brings this sort of like movie that's come back into sort of like people's consciousness recently. But yeah, it's very psychotic, very fun, very 90s. and encapsulates a lot of the themes we've seen, getting away from the whole like police and futuristic dystopian future kind of stuff.
Thank you, David, for that brief introduction to what your film was going to be. Sorry, I actually dozed off a little bit there.
Wow.
Johann, tell us a little bit about your film.
Okay, so my film, my connection or glue is mostly by not just the theme, but almost a little bit by the story. There's a lot of similar elements between Running Man and this movie. It's from the year 2000, just to give it a little bit clear here. And I would say that it has a lot of cultural influence now. There's a lot of things that this movie does that has maybe been copied a little bit from Running Man, that this movie not only has done it, I would argue, better, but also influenced pop culture as a whole. And just one final thing, just a selling point, Quentin Tarantino actually praised this movie as his favorite film from the last 2 decades. So this is a biggie on that point. So yeah, I'm not going to say anything else other than that.
Interesting. So, to tell you about my film is from 2007. Look, I'm just going to put this out on the table. I'm sort of desperate to get away from this sort of action-packed vibe of just the ways in which they, like, there's, you know, 1 or 2 titular fighting heroes and the systems they go up against and like all of that. I think we desperately need to get away from that, and I want to go for a different genre completely. However, I have taken some aspects of this film and basically translated it into what my film suggestion would be, in that they both have a theme of running. They both have the idea of trying to be somewhat inspirational and better themselves in an impressive system, whereas in Running Man, it's very much fighting against the state. Whereas in my film suggestion, it is somebody trying to fight against themselves and fundamentally better themselves. And also, the title of this film is meant as an insult towards that character, whereas it is something that he comes to embrace later on and fundamentally define himself by. And I think it is a really interesting, underrated story with a star-studded cast that I would very much like us to look at. Will I get my film, or will it be one of the 2 suggestions posed by David and Johann? We will see at the end of this Endgame. All right, then. Are you ready to play? Cool. What I want to emphasize is, obviously, there are going to be times in which certain pronouns have been altered by the language. So think very carefully, even if, say, some certain pronouns are suggested in this translation, try and think back as much as possible to what the original quote is going to be. I'm only going to award points for what I think is basically a perfect interpretation of that quote.
Gotcha.
Make sense?
Okay.
Cool. Right, first things first. Your buzzers. David?
Chopper.
And Johann?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yep, they are sufficiently different from each other. Okay, here we go. I will not accept any buzzing until I have finished the quote. You're a fun boy, Sally. I like you. That's why I'll kill you last.
Ding, ding, ding.
Johann?
Do you remember when I said I'd kill you last? I lied.
Is that the quote I'm looking for?
Oh. Okay.
David, do you have an idea?
Can I hear it again?
Yep. So, you're a fun boy, Sally. I like you. That's why I'll kill you last.
I don't know. Yeah, it seems vaguely familiar, but I don't know. I can only sort of just hazard a guess as to what it might be, but it would just be very similar to what that already is. So pass.
I mean, that could also be the right answer.
Okay, I'm just gonna say, I like you, Billy. I'll kill you last.
Okay, is that exactly what I'm looking for? The exact quotation is, "You're a funny guy, Sully. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last." So yeah, it translated Sully into Sally.
See, the pronoun thing got me
weirdly.
thinking, oh, is it like a different, like, gendered name?
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, yes, Sully and Sally are definitely different gender names.
So that's why I went down the Billy route.
Okay, what I would say is neither of you wanted to suggest what film it is, so I'll give Johan the first opportunity to guess.
Is it from Commando? Yeah. I mean, the quote I had for the other one was from Commando. I knew it was there, I just didn't know which one.
Yeah, so unfortunately, you basically gave me the line that comes after that, basically. It comes later on. I did also try having that line translated, but the translation every time came out as the exact same.
Oh.
Even when I did things like I put Afrikaans into the mix, it just would not translate it to anything else, but I lied. So I was like, fine, you're just being cut. Okay. Are you ready for quote number 2?
Yes.
They have just been deleted.
Ding, ding, ding.
Johan?
You've just been erased.
That is exactly the quote I was looking for. You've just been erased. What film is it from?
I assume that's from Eraser.
God damn it, I'm up against the Arnie expert.
No, I just thinking, like, I'm just remembering from the lexicon because, yeah, I used to love Arnie movies a lot, so yeah.
Okay, number 3. Say again.
Do you want to repeat that again?
Say again.
What?
I promise you, this won't be the most frustrating one this game.
Chopper.
I know, but...
David?
I'm just thinking, I don't know, in terms of like syllables and words here, is it actually like I'll be back? Yes.
That is correct.
What?
So, David, what film is that from?
Well, which one is it not from, as we discussed earlier?
Well, I said franchise.
Okay, Terminator.
That's a weird translation of I'll be back.
Yeah. Hence why I thought this would be a fun game to base this around.
Okay.
Number 4. I eat the Green Beret for breakfast, and now I'm very hungry.
Green Berets. Oh, I can't remember the quote.
Chopper. I'm just going to go for a guess in terms of something he might say. I eat guys like you for breakfast, and I'm pretty hungry.
Is that the exact quote I'm looking for?
Okay, I'm trying to remember movies where he would say Green Beret.
But it's also what could translate to that. That's the problem.
Green Beret. They're like the one I can think of. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna say, it's like I eat guys like you for breakfast, and I'm a Green Beret. That's all I can think of.
It is not. You were both adamant that Green Berets is something it translated. The actual quote is, I eat Green Berets for breakfast, and right now I'm very hungry.
So it's literally was similar to the original thing.
Yeah.
That's annoying.
But it's just the emphasis, because it took out the right now. It makes it sound like you've eaten the Green Berets, and now you're hungry because you've done it. As opposed to the threat being like, I eat Green Berets for you, and right now I'm very hungry. Yeah.
And that's from...
Anyway, that is from Commando.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Number 5. I don't like it in politics. I like it more in the answer.
Chopper. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like what that line could feasibly be and like what type of movies he's done. So I'm just going to say I don't like it so much in the bedroom, but more in the living room.
It is not.
I can't actually think of the quote. I know it's going to hit me in the face once I know, but I can't think of it. So I'm going to pass. I really can't think of it.
Okay. So the correct answer I'm looking for, I'll give you a hint now. It is literally from The Running Man.
Oh.
So you both have seen this film.
I don't remember it.
I'm not into politics. I'm into survival.
God damn it.
I don't know where it got the answer from, but
I
hey
need
ho.
the answer.
I thought it was something from like Twins or something, like when he's like flirting with somebody and it just took politics for some reason. I was just like, better.
Okay, fair enough. Next up, a bit of a shorter one. Mm-hmm. Are we ready? Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Chopper? Is it I'll Be Back?
Nope.
Okay.
You have the right idea somewhat, but it's not that
Okay,
close.
so basically it's a very, very short phrase. I'm trying to figure out...
When can I answer again?
I'm trying to figure out which one it is.
I'll give you another chance if Johann doesn't get it.
Why am I thinking something just as simple as like Get Out or something like that? So it might be something like that, but I can't think of it right now. So I'll pass it over. Go on then. If you really can figure it out, say it.
David, what do you think
Is
it
it
is?
Hasta La Vista, baby?
It's Stick Around.
Stick Around. Boo hiss.
So do you know what film that's from now, Johann?
It's not from The Last Action Hero, isn't it?
No, it's from Predator.
Sticks a guy in, stick around.
I'm imagining there's going to be a bit of a rush for this one, so get ready. Number 7. Discard the cookie.
Chopper.
Ding, ding, ding.
That was David.
Put that cookie down.
Yep. What film?
Turbo Man? No, Jingle All the Way, sorry.
I'm going to accept Turbo Man, sorry.
Oh, damn it. I was like, it's not called Turbo Man, what's it called? I was like, oh.
It's called Jingle All the Way.
Yeah. Damn it, Funko, why did you release Turbo Man and confuse my brain?
All I can
that
say is
movie.
I'm glad that you reminded me of that. The site I got it from told me it was Kindergarten Cop, so I was getting ready to be like, I was like, oh wait, yeah, it is that. So
Yeah.
okay, number 8.
Those are my cookies.
Think of it as a divorce.
Ding, ding, ding.
Johann?
Consider it a divorce.
Correct answer. What film?
Total Recall. Yay! It's a very good bit where they literally, it's him and Sharon Stone, and they literally kill her off, and they consider it a divorce. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we come up to the last one. I just want to emphasize to everyone what's on stake here. So David has 3, Johann has 5. So if David gets both these points, it'll go to a tie break. If not, Johann wins. So number 9. Attention, children.
Chopper?
David?
Attention, little ones?
It is not. Johann?
I think it's something. It's like I think I know what movie it's from. So I'm gonna. I think it's something as simple as like a Silence Children. I think it's Silence Children.
Is it Silence Children? This is the wildest translation in this game because it's Hasta La Vista, baby.
Oh, that was my thinking with the other one.
I thought it was like a slightly off translation from something he said in Kindergarten
but then
Cop.
because that was what Craig thought, or what that list thought the other one was, I was like, oh.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no,
wow.
it's Hasta La Vista, baby turns into Attention, Children.
Wow.
Got me completely down the wrong path.
What language is that? Is that like considered?
Like I said, it's a random combination. I did not keep check of what language combination got what results because that would have been madness.
But that's
well
like,
done.
Is that like another language in another language? You know what I mean? It's just like if it's like English to German,
children.
but it's like
at some point I would have done like German into Greek, Greek into Italian, shit like that, basically.
Attention, children.
In the end, we do come to very much Hasta La Vista, baby, to that game. So
Yes.
David ends on 3, but the winner is Johann with 5.
I'll take that.
Congratulations. I mean,
is,
David, you lost to an Endgame champion, so don't feel too bad about yourself.
And
It's
an
kind
Arnie
of bit-
expert and that stupid Jingle All the Way thing. You know, like I just didn't mention the right name, so that would have helped, but not.
Yeah, it would have
probably.
been 1 point closer.
In all fairness, there was some which I felt like, the first few bits, this is easy, and then it just got really weird. So I feel I got this out of luck, personally.
That's how it goes sometimes.
But in the end, you are our winner, so you have a choice of the 3 films in front of us. So, which of the 3 options, considering you have David's, you have mine, or you have your own, which would you like us to discuss next episode?
Interesting. So, I'm going to stick with mine because I think it would be a very interesting conversation between you guys. Although it's been very similar to what we've done now, I think it'd be interesting to talk about. This movie like I said, was in 2009, Quentin Tarantino claimed it to be his favorite film from the last 2 decades. It is a movie that its title alone has now been used in various different things and has totally influenced movies like The Hunger Games and Fortnite. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, from the year 2000, we're doing Japan's own Battle Royale.
人生はゲームです。この国はすっかりダメになってしまいました。そこで今日は皆さんにちょっと殺し合いをしてもらいます。バトルロワイヤル。ごめんな。俺が殺した反則だよな。バトルロワイヤル。残り41人。
And it is literally a bunch of kids on an island, but they are all on some form of very sort of similar thing. Government take it over, doing it for a particular thing. Lots of people killing each other, so I kind of felt that way.
But I still think enough of a diversion, like Craig was saying, that we've had a lot of police kind of action hero stuff.
Now you have murdering children, so congrats!
Yeah. And what, Craig, why can he not get on board with that?
What the hell is that supposed to mean?
But yeah.
So, David, if apparently People's Kinks is enjoying the murder of children, where can they watch this film?
So, several places you can get it as a subscription. So, if you're subscribed to any of the following services, Mubi, Freevee, Shudder, and Arrow, you can watch it all on there. You can also rent it on places like Apple, Amazon, YouTube, Sky, Rakuten. And, of course, you've always got physical media, which we usually say about as well. So you can catch it on places like DVD, Blu-ray, etc. So lots of options out there to catch Battle Royale before our next
I'll throw
episode.
something in there. The Arrow Blu-ray for Battle Royale is outstanding. It has so many behind-the-scenes features. So if you're ever interested in actually learning, like literally the making of this movie, get that version immediately.
Yeah, Arrow stuff is just always a delight in terms of what they release, etc. So yeah, please do check it out. And yeah, thank you for that suggestion, Johann. Very interesting one. And again, good that we're going to something which isn't English language. And I think even if I had won, I was tempted to go with yours just because of the whole like Quentin Tarantino thing. I was like, okay, this sounds like too famous for us to like not consider.
That's the way, David. So. Continue the circle jerk of the discussion between you and Johann. I don't exist because I have a contrarian opinion.
Hey, Johann like chose mine before, so there's already
there's a small sense of camaraderie suddenly it's in here. Brilliant.
Well, yeah, thank you for joining us, Johann. Thank you for talking all about The Running Man. And yeah, it's been a fun one, a big debate like last time. And yeah, it's been loads of fun. So as you mentioned earlier, you were talking about things like screenings, etc., and also the other podcast projects, etc. you got. So where can people catch these, and where can people find you online?
Well, if you go in on Twitter, you know it's still running apparently, although it did shut down a few weeks ago according to this thing. You can find me on JJ Chipol. If you can find my personal Instagram on Johann_trash tapes, but you can also find a lot of the stuff that me and Ed do on Enigmatic Productions. Or so if you type Enigmatic Productions on most socials, you'll find us in there. If you go onto the YouTube, you can find a lot of our video stuff. In things such as Enigmatic Retro Rewind, and the trash tapes are available on there, and the podcast is available on most other places. But if you are interested in maybe coming to one of our screenings at some point, if you're basically in the Midlands area, going around Derbyshire area, just check on the Quad Derby website and a few other bits from there. We might be able to catch one of our screenings. So yeah, you can catch us on that.
Awesome, thank you, Craig. Anything lastly from yourself?
I'm just going to go cry in a corner.
Oh dear.
Before I was like so optimistic of being like, well, maybe next time will be a better time for Craig, but then we've had this whole like murdering children thing like come up, so like now I'm like, I don't know what to think anymore.
Sorry, I apologize.
So okay, well, yeah, hopefully Craig will be okay by next time. And yeah, we've enjoyed today's episode talking about The Running Man. We can't wait to talk about Battle Royale next time. Please do join us. And as we said before, rate, review wherever you can. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
See y'all.
To keep up with the latest episodes of Well Good Movies, you can listen to us on all your usual podcast outlets, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and rate us where you can to keep our podcast growing. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Well Good Movies to keep up with the latest news and highlights from all our episodes, as well as tell us what movies you want to be discussed in the future. And if all of that isn't enough, you can also find us at our website, freshtakehub.com/wellgoodmovies, where you can catch all our episodes along with videos and articles deep diving into the worlds of film and television. So what are you waiting for? Go check out the film we'll be discussing in next time's episode.